Hey, what's up everyone? It's Joe from Gadgetry Tech, and in today's video we're going to talk about the Sivga P2 Pro Headphone. This is a $450 US open back planar magnetic headphone. Comes with a few accessories. It has some unique specs. I'm going to talk about a lot of different things in this video. So there are some different things that I've done and tested with this headphone that I have never done before. So if you're new to the channel, one, thank you. If you've been here before, there's definitely some interesting things coming up ahead. So this was sent to me from Sivga. It won't affect what I say about it. I'm very unbiased with my channel, and you will see pros and cons of the headphone, of course, as always. And I will have a generic Amazon affiliate link in the description below if you want to purchase it through that. But I don't do any kickbacks with the brand. I don't make anything off the video from them. And I don't require, obviously, that you purchase through Amazon. Purchase it wherever you like, but I hope you find this video helpful. In addition to the headphone itself, of course, you get a few accessories in the box. You get a newly designed case, and if you've watched my Luon review, you'll notice that I wasn't a huge fan of that case design, or at least the way it looked, so I'm really pleased to say they made some changes here. Opening it up, it's a pretty self-explanatory design. The headphones just rotate and you can rest the pads inside. And there's no spot or pocket for the cables, but it does come with this clothy, linty type pouch because the cables are removable. Now you also get this is a nice setup. So the default cable is terminated with 4.4 millimeter or Pentagon. If you do not use a balance connection, it comes with an adapter that turns it into a 3.5 millimeter single-ended cable. Now it's important to go this direction because some amps do not like to be have their channels combined. You don't want to go from balanced to single-ended because some amps don't play nice when you do that. So it's usually safer to do it this way. I know some people would have preferred a standard single-ended connection first and then go to balance, but I think they did that to, you know, protect whatever amp you may own. It also comes with a 1/4 inch adapter in the box, or 6.3 millimeters. So if you're planning on using 1/4 inch, where a lot of headphones just come with a 1/4 inch, which is removable to turn it into a 3.5, because this starts with balanced, you have a few different adapters on the end, which adds a little bit of weight. So it just depends on what you're connecting it to. If you're using this on a DAP or something portable, then you know the cable's going to have a little extra weight to it. So maybe replace the cable if you end up getting this. The good news is it's dual 3.5 millimeter. There's no proprietary termination. A little bit of a recess on the cup here. So if you do buy your own 3.5 millimeter cable, just make sure it doesn't have a huge ending to it. The Meze cables work. Some of the Hi-Fi-Man cables work as well. But if you go aftermarket, just make sure that this piece, the actual you know, shell or plug around the port or the termination, is small enough to still fit inside. As far as build quality and comfort, this is typically where Sivga shines, and the Luon was one of the more comfortable headphones I've ever worn. It's just an incredible headphone that has these like marshmallow-like cushions. And the P2 Pro is very similar. Now they had to design it a little bit differently because planar magnetic drivers are heavier. So even if this did use the exact same chassis, it's not going to feel the same as something like the Luon, where dynamics have a lot less weight to worry about. Overall, I find this very comfortable. I'm going to compare this to the Hi-Fi-Man the Ananda Nano, which is a wonderful headphone. But as far as comfort goes, I think Sivga is typically one of the leaders purely on comfort. The new Aoun AR5000 that I reviewed, the open back for $300, that one was really comfortable as well, partly because of the weight, the angled ear cup design. And this is a similar approach. You know, it's not a flat cup. You can see this big curve that comes around the back, and that helps distribute pressure more evenly because some of people's heads, the shape around their ear, depending on your head shape, you will get a varying level of comfort with different headphones and different pressure as a result. The Hi-Fi-Man Ananda Nano, as much as I love its technical performance, the pads are a little bit more stiff and it's very straight, and depending on your head shape, you'll get a little bit more pressure on your jaw, especially if you have a smaller head. Now overall, I do like the headband design. You have a metal headband, which is to be expected when you're paying $450, and then you have a leatherette strap. You have these little pads here to kind of relieve some of the tension, and it's this breathable cloth material. No real heat buildup. I like these little pads. To me, I can wear this for a long period of time. And the adjustment mechanism is a bit different. It basically just slides up and down. I was nervous that it would do this on its own from the weight. If you pull on it every time you put it down, it loosens. But if you simply just grab it and put it on your head, nothing really happens and it stays in its place. And I've used this for a long time, probably at least 50 to 80 hours if I had a ballpark. I've been testing some stuff lately, but I have had the P2 Pro for quite a while now, and the biggest reason is this, the speaker grill. This is a gorgeous grill. This uses red oak. It's a gorgeous wood. I like that because every single headphone is going to have somewhat of a unique grain to it. It feels and looks amazing, in my opinion. As far as looks go, I like it. However, this leads me to my first issue with the headphone. And I was, vocal to Sivga about it because I got this prior to this being announced. And when you have a planar magnetic headphone, the drivers are huge. This is like roughly, I think it's 95 or 97 by 60 something millimeters. I'll put the number on the screen. It's a big driver. And when you have a driver like this, it pushes sound backwards just as much as it's doing forward or close to it. And it's just the nature of a big old planar magnetic driver. So there is a lot of energy that comes out of the headphone. That's why hi-fi men went with stealth magnets, because they don't want the magnets to impede the sound waves or create a back wave, which causes reverb. It can kind of confuse the sound waves coming to your ear, so it's not as clear and concise. It's a lot of reasons behind this type of stuff, but the idea is that you shouldn't hear a reflection. Typically planars are very much open, and when you wear them, it's also why if another person is wearing an open back planar in the same room, you're going to hear a lot of their music that they're playing. It's very loud outward. So when you put a big old metal plate behind the planar, you can kind of see where this is going to become an issue. This is basically an audio reflector, and it created some interesting anomalies when I was listening to it. If you have a planar magnetic headphone at home and you're watching this review, put it on, play some music, and then put your hands not to seal the cups, but spaced out just outside the cup, and hear how different that sounds. It creates a little bit of a shout or a honk, and the reverb can kind of muddy up the mix, if you will. Not from a bass perspective, but it really stunts the clarity. So this does not help with sound quality. And it could be tuned perfectly, but when you have this highly reflective plate, acoustically speaking, it's never going to sound as clean. And there is a noticeable resonance, especially in the mid-range, to a point where if I'm playing it kind of loud and I hit stop immediately, you can hear like a chassis resonance that trails for a fraction of a second. It is that noticeable. So that leads me to this side of the ear cup, where I removed the grill entirely. Now you could call this the P2 Pro unveiled, if you're familiar with that new Susvara. This is the driver assembly. There's a little screen on it. I highly do not recommend leaving it like this because you don't want to leave it exposed, especially, God forbid, you have a small metal screw. You don't want anything to risk damaging the driver. Now, I modded this. I've spent so much time taking this thing apart to see how it affected sound quality, and I even bought some new tools to test out this theory. Now, I want to start by saying this. The P2 Pro is very easy to service. A lot of this stuff is user replaceable. You can remove the pads, and that exposes several screws behind it to then take out the driver. There's really only 4 screws you have to remove. Once the 4 screws are removed, because they basically sandwich the driver down, you can carefully pull out the entire driver, and it's a short lead for where this is terminated. You can see this wire here, so don't just like yank it out, otherwise you'll break this off and ruin it. But once you've done that and you've tilted this out, it then exposes the ear cup grill. Now this is the grill assembly. I tried doing it to where I just removed this and then reinstalled this grill, and this little plate kind of sandwiches it back on. However, the spacing for these guides for how this attaches to the cup accounts for the thickness of this. So I wasn't able to simply just remount that underneath without this piece. That way I could test a pseudo open design. This is kind of going down the path of modding, and I did a ridiculous amount of mods. I stuffed all different kinds of things in here to test the sound quality, and I think I might make a 3D printed file to basically replace this assembly with my own. But I want to show you something. So I bought a Dayton Audio DATS 3. This is to help me measure linearity with drivers for both headphones, IEMs, and speakers, because I'll be reviewing a lot of speakers. And electrical impedance can affect how different speakers or headphones interact with different amplifiers. If you have a dynamic headphone that has a 32 ohm impedance, but there is a big, the driver resonance gives you like 50 to 100 ohms extra impedance in one area, like a big spike. That means that depending on where that resonance is, a higher output impedance amplifier will affect the way the bass sounds. And it's a similar characteristic to how bass is handled with IEMs when you have multiple driver arrangements. So this is for that. Now, typically, a planar magnetic headphone has a very linear impedance curve, or plot, I guess. The line from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz should be relatively straight. Now, to give you an example, here is the Aria Stealth. Now, the Aria Stealth has an impedance, I think it's rated at 32 ohms. I'm getting 30.5 ohms. I forgot what the spec was on the official site. And then you have this spike right around 55 hertz. That's the resonant frequency of that driver, which means if you're wearing a planar magnetic, or in this case, the Aria Stealth, and you break the seal a little bit with glasses, or you put your finger on, you should have a little bit of a lift at that frequency range. So when you look at the Sivga P2 Pro, you can see there are multiple spikes, and I don't want to say dips, but there is a much bigger array. You know, if I turn the Aria Stealth back on, you can see it's relatively linear, and then the P2 Pro has these reflections up and down. So normally you won't have as much of an impact on electrical impedance from a grill. The grills are either somewhat transparent, or there's enough dampening in the back where it should maintain some form of linearity. Now, when I removed this whole grill assembly and re-measured it, you can see it was a bit smoother all the way across. The spike that happens around here, which is about 730 hertz for the driver, is not, excuse me, not as extreme. You have the driver resonance is about 78 hertz, but this lower hump down here, closer to, let's see, 45 hertz, is not really there anymore. I got a more linear electrical impedance because I wasn't dealing with as much of the acoustical impact, or acoustic impact, that this grill made. This is very technical stuff, but it's the first way I can quantify what I'm hearing. And what happens is, planars are very fast drivers. They respond very quickly to notes, and that's called attack and decay, you know, responding to a note and then immediately stopping. So this has a very fast attack. It's the leading edge of a note is very quick and precise, and it sounds good. The issue is the decay does not closely match the attack at all, because then you have these backwave reflection issues that do impact the sound quality. So getting into sound quality, here are the measurements of the Sivga P2 Pro. Now, I use a Gross KB006X Pinaclone. If you're not familiar with what that means, that's fine. But basically, unless someone has the exact same ear simulator, you can't always compare apples to apples for measurements. I have a lot of different headphone and headset measurements on the site here, so feel free to use the link in the description in case you want to compare against others. The P2 Pro actually has a pretty good bass profile. I don't mind that there's a roll-off below 30 hertz. To me, that's fine. Not a lot of music goes below 20 hertz or 30 hertz, so not too big of a deal. It's relatively flat, and I'd say up until about 200 hertz, even 300 hertz, the overall sound profile is totally fine. It's a little bit warm, and I do like the way the bass sounds. Now, I'll get into some subjective stuff here in a minute. So the issue I have is when you get into the mid-range, upper mids, and treble. Now, this curve, all of these little rises and dips, isn't really normal of what you see. And just to kind of put that in perspective, if I look at the Sivga Luon, you can see, let me brighten up this color a little bit for you. Not another green. So it is a lot smoother. And even though there's a little bit of a recess here, and it's followed by a lot more energy in the 3000 hertz area, it's more linear. And what happens is, one, this is easier to EQ, but the other issue is when you have all of these rises and peaks, you can have some songs that can sound fantastic and other songs where it doesn't sound natural. Now, this isn't like the end of the world. Some people will still like the way this sounds. And funny enough, I think what this sound profile did is it made heavy metal quite fun to listen to. This coloration kind of mimicked more of hearing heavy metal live than it does from a headphone. So there are some merits to having a colored sound, but it really has to line up to a specific note or song that you're listening to. The flexibility of this is not the greatest if you're used to a more neutral sound or something that sounds more natural. Now, the rise, you have this dip at 2000 hertz. It rises to 3K. You know, it fills in nicely in that area. There's no real sense of shout or anything. Very relaxed from 4 to 6K. Before it really picks up in the upper treble. The upper treble extension isn't too bad. It doesn't come across as bright or airy sounding as a HiFiMan headphone, but this relaxed sound just kind of makes music sound more relaxed to listen to, more laid back. less aggressive or offensive. Now, I mentioned removing the grill and hearing how that sounded. I just want to show you what happens. If you pop the grill off and make no other change, you can see that the bass delivery is a little bit lighter, but it extends below 30 hertz now, a little bit stronger. The frequencies up here are pretty much the same, and this indicates it's not just this reflective issue. That is a byproduct of either the drivers, or, the arrangement for this magnet structure creating its own back wave, or the pad design, or some combination of both. So there isn't a massive difference. Now, I tried a lot of different fills. If you're familiar with the Swiffer dusters, I put a Swiffer duster behind the grill, and that is the blue line. And you could see it flattened out the bass more. It was more linear, but I actually filled in the null at 2000 hertz more, and everything sounded a little bit more detailed to me. It also got rid of some of the honk that I was getting at 1000 hertz, that peakiness. It's almost like a slight walkie-talkie effect. It tamed that quite a bit, and that was literally just putting some Swiffer pad stuff behind it. My favorite one, though, is I took a single cotton ball. That's this orange lime. So I'm going to get rid of all of the sound profiles except the original. Taking a single cotton ball, stretching it out, flattening it inside, led to this sound profile. And I think it was better because the bass was more linear, and you can always EQ this back up. The dip here was just slightly different. I didn't have as much of a pronunciation at, like, let's say 1200 hertz, and then it filled up more before the 3K peak. It wasn't as sharp sounding. The rest of it sounded very similar. So I think even though it won't look as pretty, my ideal situation with this is I would take a single cotton ball, pull it apart until I could fill it, and then I'm either going to 3D print something or find a way to just make this gasket work to cover it, because I put this on and off and it didn't really make a difference on the measurements at that point, but I still didn't have the reflection issue that I was getting. Like I said, I was modifying this a lot. I don't believe you should buy a headphone with the expectation that you have to mod it. I think if you already own one and you're looking to get more out of it, there's no denying physics, and this shiny reflective plate here does add a reverb effect to it, or a ringing effect, and there's no way to get rid of that unless you remove this plate, and then you can tune from there if you like. As far as general music listening goes, outside of the whole reflection issue, this has a relatively dark sound profile, especially because the upper mids and low treble are relaxed. You have a bit of a fill at 3K, thank God, because it needs some kind of detail and fill in that region, but nothing comes across as shouty or sibilant. It's pretty chill and easy to listen to. The bass notes, it doesn't have as much punch as a lot of dynamics I've heard. If you compare it to something like a Focal or Meze Audio product like a 109 Pro, those typically have a better hit when it comes to rock music. And then on the bass extension side, it's noticeably better. Planars have really good extension. It's no exception here. And also because of its higher power handling, you can always EQ it up anyway if you want more of that perceived impact. The mid-range is really just my biggest gripe with it. Not only do you have to deal with a reflection issue if you don't modify it, but it's not that linear. And as a result, if you listen to a lot of songs you're intimately familiar with, there is a noticeable coloration in vocals and especially string instruments. They don't sound as natural. Sometimes they sound better. Sometimes they just don't sound as natural. So it's just one of those things where, are you trying to hear something different just because you want something different? Or are you trying to adhere to a more real-life presentation of how that artist's voice sounds, or how that instrument was supposed to sound? There's different ways to look at it. I'm not saying one or the other is the right answer here, but it's noteworthy to consider. As far as detail retrieval goes, for a darker sounding headphone, I still found the detail retrieval to be decent. I think you have to EQ some of it to have a stronger emphasis in the upper mids and low treble if you want more of a perceived detail. But overall, it has a smoothing effect over a lot of tracks. There's no graininess to the presentation. It's a very smooth delivery, and it has a dark soundstage, but because these drivers are so large, the big planars, they do still image quite wide. So it's a rather wide but darker soundstage. Nothing that's really in your face or overly bright and airy. Okay, so here's the thing. This has potential. Now, out of the box, I would just prefer the Luant from Sivga. It's definitely brighter sounding. It's not as relaxing of a sound as this, but the tonality sounds a little bit more natural. And you also have these just gorgeous marshmallow pads, especially if you wear glasses. I just love wearing this headphone. Crazy comfortable. It's really light. And the bass is actually quite nice on this. It's very punchy. The dynamic punch or impact of the bass is better on the Luon. It doesn't have the same tactility and depth as the P2 Pro. Planar bass is typically better for longer, deeper notes. They have really good extension below 30 hertz typically. And this also has a very high power handling. That's one of the saving graces with this. It's a good driver from a sense of power handling. So if you want to get other things you like about this for the comfort and design, or you actually want a product you can start modding and playing with, because this isn't glued, it's pretty fun to mess around with. You can EQ this like crazy. And if you own one of these, here's my EQ on the screen. Feel free to copy this if you use Peace or some other program with parametric EQ. Just give it a shot and let me know what you think. I think it makes it sound a little bit more neutral, but I didn't want to totally take away from the relaxed sound signature that this has. And it still sounded great for metal as well. I didn't ruin that sound signature that I liked for it. And then you have the HiFiMan Ananda Nano, which used to be like $600 and now it's down to $499. So for $50 more, you get this guy. This is better. It's a lot better sonically. It doesn't have the reflection issues. It's tuned better out of the box. It's much more linear. The only downside to this guy is it's not as comfortable as Sivga. If you place a lot of value in comfort and you're okay with some tweaks or modding, then maybe this is still an option. I think this is just a safer pick in general, especially because the only real critique I have with the Ananda Nano is some people might still find it a little bit bright in the mid to high treble. You can always do a treble shelf and just reduce it a few dB and tame it. Otherwise, the bass is great. The Luon still has the most punchy bass, so if you listen to a lot of rock, I'd still consider it dynamic. The Luon or the AR5000 from Own is a fun headphone as well on the dynamic side. As far as tonality and timbre goes, you know, the Aria Stealth or the Ananda Nano isn't that bad. The Sennheiser HD600 line is a significant improvement in the mid-range. This has a lot more bass extension and you can bring more upper treble to it, but out of the box it doesn't sound overly airy or bright. This is a relatively fatigueless listening experience. I can just play music on this, and if you use it for a long period of time, your head and ears will adjust to this and you will end up eventually liking it. If you listen to one headphone of any kind for a long period of time, as long as it's not a total train wreck, your head kind of recalculates what sound should sound like and it won't sound as bad. So some of the burn-in stuff that people talk about are more your head getting used to the sound than anything else. But I think EQ can go a long way, and I think the biggest issue with the P2 Pro is this backplate. If they came out with a revision that did something different and removed this or created a much more open version like that, I think it would be such a much better headphone. And when you factor in comfort and EQ ability, it's not bad. I would take this over the Moondrop Para, because that one, the impedance was so low and it was hard to drive that it didn't really work well with some amps. I didn't like the build quality or comfort of the Para. I think the Sundara is still a better pick. I would take most HiFiMan products over this with exception of comfort. The Sivga still wins there. The Fio FT5 has its own tuning issues. I'll be reviewing that soon. That's a crazy comfortable headphone, even though it's really heavy. I like the ergonomics of it. It's dark but bright sounding at the same time. It's an interesting one, but it doesn't have the reflection issues either. So there's really no perfect sub $500 planar. I think the best sub $500 planar I've heard so far ever is the Ananda Nano, now that it's had a price cut. So take that for what you will. Overall, this isn't a terrible product. I just think this was a big issue, personally. I don't think you should have to modify a headphone to make it sound the way it should or what it has the potential to sound. And I'm not doing this to attack Sivga. They've been great to work with. I've provided this feedback and it is what it is, and they really do care about what people have to say, so maybe we'll see some changes down the road. But yeah, I just wanted to keep it honest and open with you all. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I'd love to see you at the next one. With that being said, stay safe and I'll see you next time.